One of those common questions we get asked at Formulr is, if you could do one thing to improve your landing page, what would it be? And the answer isn't what you might think. It's not the design, not necessarily even the imagery. The answer is actually about copy. In this video, we'll talk about how you can increase conversion by updating your copy to really resonate with your audience. If you watch any of the previous videos, you'll know by now that there's 5 key elements you need for a landing page. You need the value proposition, you're going to need the objection handling, you're going to need clear CTAs, you're going to need some social proof, and also finally that risk reversal. So now that you know that you need those 5 key elements, there's actually another formula that you can use in your landing page to really boost those conversion rates through copyright. And that formula is called McLab's formula. Now, if you can see on the right-hand side here, that formula is essentially where you can maximize that probability of conversion by maximizing the motivation. You need to have the most motivation possible. Force that with the value proposition. So these are your promoters, and then you want to get rid of the detractors, which is your friction and your anxiety. And you'll notice that incentive in the middle is all about reducing the ask as much as possible in parallel to maximizing that motivation. You maximize the dopamine from the motivation, and you want to minimize that cortisol and stress from the anxiety with a killer incentive. So naturally, to be able to do this well, what you need is you need to really understand your customers. And we've talked about that in the previous video. So assuming you know who your customer is and their key pain points, we'll now look at examples, some specific copywriting formulas that you can use on that landing page. Let's jump in with an example. Okay, so Hibbs is a great example of how they've done copywriting really well and they know their customer down to a T. So if you start with the opening hero section of the landing page, you've got the headline, right? And so you see hair loss treatment as a long-term solution. The idea of the headline is that you want it to be as specific as possible to really drive that motivation part of that formula. So for example, hair loss treatments for long-term solution. They know, for example, that hair loss is something that happens over time. That's a pain point that they're trying to agitate. And actually, a solution is something that isn't going to help them make their hair look fuller for one evening. It's something they want to be able to solve consistently for a long period of time. To make this actually a bit more specific, you could always include something like time frame. So reduce hair loss within 12 weeks, or join over 1,000 members who have increased their hair growth in 12 weeks, for example. But what they've done is they've just combined that with the subheading. So you can see that specificity comes in with 3 to 6 months time specificity. So what they've done is they've included that with the subheadings. So time specificity with 3 to 6 months. They've included a key opinion leader, so doctors trusted, reinforce that trust. And then finally, they've provided that risk reversal up front. It's an online process that reduces that friction, and unlimited provider support. So it's reducing that anxiety and reducing that friction. So that's what you want to maximize that motivation with your headline. These guys, they just increase the specificity up here in the subheading, and they've included some reducing the anxiety up front here. So now you've got the motivation part. Now we talk about the value proposition, that second part of that formula. To increase the value proposition and maximize the value proposition, look what these guys have done here. They've claimed that, right, DHT blockers prevent hair loss, and they've backed this up by clinically proven ingredients. So the next part is to talk about value proposition. To maximize your value proposition, again, specificity is key. And if you look at a product like hair loss treatment, it is quite a technical area, right? And so the biggest recommendation I would make here is that you want the reading grade level to be as low as possible, 5th, 6th grade at the most. So you can see what these guys have done here is they've taken quite a technical topic and put it in very easy to read English. DHT blockers prevents hair loss. That protects hair follicles and keeps DHT hormones levels in check. Key ingredients to help kickstart regrowth. Supplements to improve scalp health. Now, with the value proposition, they've explained the key ingredients, the feature, and they've turned it into the benefits. This ingredient leads to this outcome, and they focus on the outcome, which in this case is regrowth. And by putting it in simple language, which is quite a technical medical topic, that's how they're able to maximize that value proposition. Standard upsells, great news. Thicker hair is in your future. Again, appealing to the use case and the motivation. They're really driving that motivation forward. Again, licensed provider shows that trust. What's included? Okay, so here's where they've kind of moved towards away from value proposition and moved towards reducing the anxiety and reducing that friction part of the equation. So they've got once a day treatment options, again, addressing those key questions of how laborsome is this going to be to actually use. Doctor trusted ingredients, again, reducing the anxiety that this is just some rogue supplement on the internet that's being sold. They try to reduce that friction by increasing the online process. You don't have to deal with any middleman. You don't have to call anybody out for call centers. Direct to your door delivery. You get it through the post. No waiting around. No GP appointments. No calling up at 8 a.m. And again, support is there when you need reinforcing that trust. So in terms of copywriting, at this point, if you haven't realized, a lot of it is about keeping it simple, clear, and benefit focused. And that's where knowing your customer is key. What no guru will ever tell you is that 80% of copywriting is understanding your customer, what's going on in their head, their conversations, their anxieties, their motivations. And this is what Hims have done super well. They understand who they're talking to, the pain points, the key anxieties of men who are experiencing hair loss. And they've tried to reduce that jargon by simplifying that copy to be benefit driven to the outcome that they're looking for. That transformation. Okay, next section, what they've done here is they've focused on the social proof. Remember that element of that you need on a landing page. So thousands of guys who are loving their results with Hims. And you can see, I mean, look, okay, the next section is social proof. Now this is awesome because what they've done is they've shown visible transformations and they've taken the reviews that back up the copy and the value proposition in their claim. And this is a key point I want to call out now. If you're able to use social proof that reinforces the specificity of the value propositions you're going to use, that is a winning combination in terms of boosting your conversions. So let's see how they do that. Between month 4 and 5, the progress blew me away, right? Again, backs up the 3 to 6 month claim we saw in the header. Hims is giving me the confidence back. Again, backs up the outcome that someone's looking to get. More confidence. Again, I've noticed my hair getting thicker in places that was thin and it had more body. Again, the desired outcome that's being claimed in that first section. Going back to that formula, you've got motivation, you've got value proposition, you've got incentive, friction, anxiety. Trying to reduce the second half of the formula increases the first half. Maximize that dopamine of like, hey, I can look like my younger self. Minimize the cortisol, like, I'm gonna have to take these pills, spray on my hair, etc. How hair care works through Hims. They've said, take the hair quiz. Again, an initial entry into their funnel, intake and assessment, free delivery, ongoing support. Again, they've reduced the barriers to action, increased trust by saying we're around leaders. And the first step into their funnel is not about add to cart. It's not about buy now. It's take the quiz. Let's see where you are right now in your hair loss journey. And notice how the CTAs are, again, add to cart, buy now, get my stuff. It's get started. The CTA is a softer action, a smaller commitment they're asking somebody to take who might be nervous about medicinal products or over-the-counter medicine online. Just take the quiz and get started. So what does this mean from a copywriter perspective? Well, so far we've talked about that formula. Again, having a really specific outcome-driven headline. We've talked about adding the specific value props, both in the hero and the next section below. Again, this will come from your research. And what you want to do is make sure that it uses simple grade 4 language, as benefit and outcome driven as possible, showcasing that transformation. So once you've agitated that pain, you've shown the outcome, you've shown the benefits, and you've shown this specifically how your product helps, moved into reducing the anxiety, reducing that friction as much as possible, reinforcing that trust, and you've then spoken about the small action they need to take to get started. If it were me, you might ask, well, how would I improve the copywriting on this page? Now, if it were me, what I would do is I would definitely increase some of the social proof under the CTAs. I'll say join over X amount of men who have started this treatment or seen results. Again, makes you feel like you're not alone because of the taboo of this subject. I would add in some little stickers about the percentages they have, about people who have seen efficacy, or some of the studies around DHT blockers and finasteride and stuff like that. I would absolutely increase and make the guarantee way more obvious, whether there's their return process. I would talk about the times of delivery, the cadence of the delivery. I'm sure that comes in through later of their funnel. And I would, by talking about the next steps and reducing that uncertainty, that's how you can maximize the conversion rate. The less uncertainty you have on your page, both in terms of what happens next and in terms of how your solution works, the better your conversion rate will be. All right, so now we've seen some copywriting in action through Hims' page. Let's take a look at some key questions you can ask so you can maximize the conversions on your page. through copywriting. All right, so if we take a look at this Meta Labs formula again, the motivation and the value proposition, the question that I love to ask is, am I using specific numbers, names, or examples instead of some vague claims? All right, so we saw on Hims that they were using 3 to 6 months for the results. They're making it time-bound and specific regarding hair loss. Did I describe the real outcomes or the benefit the readers actually want? Again, reverse hair loss in 3 to 6 months, right? You can't get more clear than that in terms of outcome and specificity of time. Am I opening curiosity loops to keep the reader engaged? So this, I would say, is particularly relevant in your headline. You kind of want to show to a little bit about the how, but not fully explain it. You just want to make it super clear about the outcome and the promise that you say that your product will deliver on in that hero section. Into the friction, as it does the copy clearly tell the reader what to do next? So is it clear, the trial, the quiz, the sample pack that you're looking to push them towards? Have I used soft, low friction CTA for the readers who are not ready to commit? So again, if you can't get them to buy straight away, push them towards that secondary lead magnet, trial, or whatever. Is every sentence leading to a logical next step? For this one, I'd say it's more about making sure that your visual hierarchy of your page is correct. So you wouldn't want to put, let's say, delivery information in the hero section unless you had a situation where your product is, time bound or specifically urgent. So CTA, does my CTA clearly state the benefit of the outcome of clicking? Again, stop hair loss now, for example, might not be a bad CTA if they're lower in the funnel. Is there copy around the CTA that reduces friction and anxiety? Again, I love putting social proof like reviews to show that user is not alone and that people have done this before. Trust badges in terms of payment icons if your site is a little bit less known. Have I used specific strong verbs in CTA? I think verbs are great to use in all sections of your page. So for example, you might start with a verb for your value propositions, like it stops moisture, for example, or it reverses hair loss. Some action words always helps highlight that transformation. And I think you can use it in both CTAs and also value props. Objection handle. So for this one, this all comes down to research, and that's copywriting and how well you know your customer. But the key thing is that you want to address both the emotional and the logistical, or the real world problems, right, of the transformation, the real world outcomes they're trying to deliver. Did I include any phrases that reduce fear? So for example, risk reversal you want to have throughout your page, but you definitely want to reinforce it in your objection handling. Like, this is the time to do it. You can cancel any time, you have 30 days to return, etc., full refund. Whatever you're offering, you want to make sure that it's there in the objection handling, because this section will be read. Have I written anything that might accidentally create confusion or distrust? This sounds really basic, but I guarantee you, if you take a break from your copywriting, after you have a couple of iterations, you want to take a step back and you want to go through everything again, because time and time again, we see landing pages. They have a promise that contradicts itself in the value proposition or the FAQs. And that uncertainty will kill your conversion. So 100% have a look at it again. And finally, as general points, you want to make sure that your copy is no more than a 5th or 6th grade reading level. Aim for 4th, but 5th or 6th grade absolute max. The simpler you make it, the easier it is to understand and the less cognitive load you're putting on the user. Part of that means cutting out the jargon and the buzzwords, and part of it is making sure that when someone lands on the page, you've got to ask yourself, will a 10-year-old understand this in the first 5 seconds? Because the reality is, if you don't orientate them the first 3 seconds, they will bounce and they won't even get a chance. You won't even get a chance to boost motivation. We'll put a link down below to our landing page guide. And if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments, or I look forward to seeing you in the next video of the series.